Um. Oh, so okay. So y'all remember? We all remember John Boone, Detective of Mars, right? Um. So he's trying to find out who the terrorists are because there are now terrorists on Mars. It's a shame. Um. It's John Boone versus the Reds. Ryan Gosling. Oh my god. Okay, yeah. Imagine Ryan Gosling, but he's like 60. He's like 60. Um but also they've solved aging, I think. They haven't said it yet. They haven't straight up said that it could have been 80 years since they first landed on Mars at this point, but we wouldn't know because they made mice live 15 years. So you can only imagine. It started in 2027, but it could be 2080 right now. And John Boone is still like flying around on his fucking airbender wingsuit. So it's John Boone, American hero, first man on Mars versus the Reds. Not the commies. They want Mars to stay red for some reason. Like Mars is all like dusty and like oxidized and like gross. And honestly, I want to see Mars like a different color. So I don't agree with the Reds. I want Mars to be blue or pink or purple. But for some reason, these Reds keep on like blowing up mining equipment and like knocking satellites out of the sky. It's really annoying. So John Boone, American hero, is going around and he's like taking time out from his precious life. Like he's not gonna live forever. Uh, he's taking time out of his precious life to go and investigate who is trying to sabotage the development of Mars. There's a few suspects, a lot of them being the original 100. The original 100 landed on Mars. So there is a lot of suspects there because they got all like big heads about it. They're like, well, I was the first one here. But that's not true because the first one there was actually John. And then everyone else came later. Like 9 years later. Like 8 years later, everyone else, like, you know, John went back to Earth and everybody thought it was so cool. And then 100 more people wanted to go. And then John Boone got to be part of the original 100. So, and everyone got a really big head about it. They're like, I should have a say in how Mars develops. Indigenous John. Yeah, he's basically indigenous. But so now he gets to be all like cool, like I don't know. I've been watching too much Star Trek, so I keep thinking he's like Captain Picard when he goes into the Sherlock Holmes story. So he's literally like Sherlock Holmes, and he like flies around Mars like smoking a pipe and like going But it's like a one man band, you know. And he goes and investigates one of his best friends, who is like a poster child for the Reds. She's a poster child for the Reds because she was a part of the first 100 and she was like the original Red. She was like, I think that Mars is only untouched once. And I know that it's very exciting and we want to colonize Mars and we want to industrialize Mars, but I think we should, like, that's fine. But maybe it doesn't have to be now. Maybe it's not our generation that, sorry, I'm getting way too passionate about it. But anyways, she's like, maybe we can slow down and we can scientifically explore Mars. We can scientifically explore and catalog Mars, and then we can decide what kind of development that it needs. She's like the original Red. Keep Mars red again. And John goes and investigates her, and he has like his I'm just Ken moment. He's like, I'm Kenuff to unite Mars in a unified mission. Shut up, Anne. I love you, bitch. But it's too late. I'm doing a terrible job at summarizing. But I'm kind of doing a good job, low-key. I did not prepare for this at all. And Anne was like, fuck you, John. Love you too, bitch. I'm gonna remember your promise that everybody on Mars wants the same thing. Even though he literally had said like 2 hours earlier, he was like, everybody on Mars wants different things. Stop being silly, Anne. Everyone wants different things. We all just gotta work together to do our different things. And then later, he was all like, we can all work together because we all want the same thing. And I think he truly believes that. I love you, bitch. I'm never gonna stop loving you, bitch. Peace, love, unity, and respect, bitch. Oh, and we learned a new word. Aries. Areoforming. Areoforming. Different from geoforming, which is also not a word. Also, so there's geology and there's areology. Areology would be the study of Mars geology. Anne is a geologist, but now she's an aerologist. Aerologist. I got an aerologist. I think I'm going to say aerologist. Because that flows better and it doesn't sound like areolas. The end. If you're confused now, just forget that I said that part. Aeroforming, Anne said, and a rare little smile flashed over her face. Seeing it, John felt his face flush. He hadn't seen her smile like that in years. And he loved Anne. He loved to see her smile. I like that word, she said now. She pointed a finger at him. But I'll hold it to you, John Boone. I'll remember what you've said tonight. Me too, he said. The rest of the evening was more relaxed. And the next day, Simon saw him down to the airstrip, to the rover he was going to drive northward. And Simon, who usually would have seen him off with a smile and a handshake, at most a nice to see you, suddenly said to him, I really appreciate what you said last night. I really think it cheered her up. especially what you said about kids. She's pregnant, you see. What? John shook his head. She didn't tell me. Are you the father? Are you the father? Yeah, Simon grinned. How old is she now? 60? Yeah, it's stretching things a bit, so to speak. But it's been done before. They took an egg frozen about 15 years ago, fertilized it, and planted it in her. We'll see how it goes. They say Hiroko stays pregnant all the time these days. Just keeps popping them like an incubator. Same C-section over and over. They say a lot of things about Hiroko, but it's all just stories. Well, but we heard this from someone who supposedly knows. The coyote, John said sharply. Simon raised his eyebrows. I'm surprised she told you about him. John grunted, obscurely annoyed. No doubt his fame meant that he missed out on a lot of gossip. It's good that she did. Well, anyway, he extended his right hand and they shook, hooking their fingers in the stiff clasp that had developed in the old space days. Don't say that in my chat. He extended his right hand and they shook, hooking their fingers in the stiff clasp that had developed in the old space days. Congratulations. Take care of her. Simon shrugged. You know Anne. She does what she wants. I now realize I could have stopped here last week because there is an actual stop. T Fuzz C, thank you for 24 months, 2 years, dude. Thank you. So Boone drove north from Argier for 3 days, enjoying the countryside and the solitude, and spending a few hours each afternoon ransacking the planetary records to track people's movement, looking for correlation with the sabotage incidents. Early on the 4th morning, he reached the Marineris Canyons, which were some 1,500 kilometers north of Argier. He ran into a north-south transponder road and followed it up a short rise to the southern rim of Melis Chasma and got out of the rover to have a proper look. He had never been to this part of the Great Canyon system. Before the completion of the Marineris Transverse Highway, it had been extremely hard to get to. It was dramatic, no doubt about it. The Melis Cliff dropped a full 3,000 meters from rim to canyon floor, so that the rim had a kind of glider's view north. The other wall of the canyon was just visible out there, its rim peeking over the horizon. And between the two cliffs lay the spacious expanse of Melis Chasma. the heart of the whole Marineris complex. He could just make out the gaps in distant cliffs that marked the entrances to other canyons. Eos Chasma to the west, Candor to the north, Coprates to the east. John walked the broken rim for more than an hour, pulling his helmet's binocular lenses down over his faceplate for long periods of time, taking in as much as he could of the greatest canyon on Mars, feeling the euphoria of red land. He threw rocks over the side and watched them disappear. He talked to himself and sang. He hopped on his toes in a clumsy dance. Then he got back in his rover, refreshed, and drove a short distance along the rim, to the start of the cliff road. Here, the transverse highway became a single concrete lane and switchbacked down the spine of an enormous rock ramp that extended down from the south rim to the canyon floor. This odd feature, called the Geneva Spur, pointed north almost perpendicularly from the cliff, straight toward Candor Chasma. It was so perfectly placed for their purposes that with the road on it, it looked like a ramp that the road builders had constructed. It was a steep spur, however. And the road had been forced to switch back all the way down, to keep the grade within reason. It was all visible from above. 1,000 switchbacks snaking down the spine. 1,000 switchbacks snaking down the spine, looking like yellow thread stitched down a bump in a stained orange carpet. Every time you think you can visualize something, he includes like a banana for scale. And you're like, oh shit. I'm like, yeah, I know what that looks like. Boone drove down this marvel carefully. I just remembered the dirt orgy was real. We don't talk about the dirt orgy. Yeah, anyways, that's the other part, dude. Okay, I know if you don't have any context for what we're reading, you're like, what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? Okay, the dirt orgy, that I should mention, is real, and the fucking... They left. There's a lost colony. They are also very suspect for being the terrorists. There's a lost colony that Hiroko started. It's not a cult, it's a colony. Okay. Hiroko ran off and started a colony that's like nobody knows where it is. And then Apparently Arcady also has like a cult, but we don't know if that's just like John being snarky, or not John, if that's just Sax being sassy. Sax being sassy. There's a lot going on. I can't wait to hear about all of these things. Boone drove down this marvel carefully, turning the rover's steering wheel left, then right, then left, then right, time after time, until he actually had to stop and rest his arms and give himself a chance to look back and up at the southern wall behind him. It was steep indeed. It's exactly what would... Okay, left, then right, then left, then right, time after time, until he actually had to stop to rest his arms and give himself a chance to look back and up at the southern wall behind him. It was steep indeed, fluted by a fractal pattern of deeply eroded ravines. Then it was off again for another half-hour's drive. Hairpin turns, left and right, again and again, until finally the road extended straight down the top of the flattening spur, which eventually spread out and merged into the canyon floor. And down there was a little cluster of vehicles. It turned out to be the Swiss team that had just finished building the road, and he ended up spending the night with them. They were a group of about 80, mostly young, mostly married, speaking German and Italian and French, and, for his benefit, English, in several different accents. They had kids with them and cats, and a portable greenhouse, thick with herbs and garden vegetables. Soon they would be off like gypsies, in a caravan made up mostly of their earth-moving vehicles, traveling up to the west end of the canyon, to thread a road through Noctis Labyrinthus and onto the east flank of Tharsis. After that, there would be other roads, perhaps one over the Tharsis Bulge, between Arja Mons and Pavonis Mons. Perhaps one north to Icus Overlook. They weren't sure yet, and Boone got the impression that they didn't really care. They planned to spend the rest of their lives traveling around building roads. So it didn't matter much to them where they went next. Road gypsies forever. They made sure all their kids shook John's hand. And after dinner, he gave them a short talk, rambling in his usual way about their new life on Mars. When I see you people when I see you new people out here, it really makes me happy. Because it's a part of a new pattern of life. We've got the chance to make a new society out here. Everything's changing on the technical level, and the social level might as well follow. I'm not exactly sure what the new society should be or should look like. That's the hard part, after all. But I know that it should be done. And I think you and all the other small groups out on the surface are figuring it out on an empirical basis. And seeing you helps me to think about it. Which it did, though he was never much good at doing it on his feet. So he just slithered along a bit more in his free associational way, plucking whatever stuck out of the bag of his thoughts. And their eyes shone in the lamplight as they listened to him. Later, he sat with a few of them in a circle around a single lit lamp, and they stayed up through the night talking. The young Swiss asked him questions about his first trip, and about the first years in Underhill, both of which obviously had mythic dimensions for them. And he told them the real story, sort of, and made them laugh a lot. And asked them questions about Switzerland, how it worked and what they thought of it, why they were here rather than there. A blonde woman laughed when he asked that. Do you know about the Bugan? I'm probably not pronouncing this correctly. Do you know about the Bugan? She said, and he shook his head. He's part of our Christmas. Sammy Claus comes to all the houses one by one, you see. And he has an assistant, the Bugan, who wears a cloak and a hood and carries a big bag. Sammy Claus asks the parents how the children have been that year, and the parents show him the ledger. The record, you know. And if the children have been good, Sammy Claus gives them presents. But if the parents say the children have been bad, the Bugan sweeps them up in his bag and carries them away, and they're never seen again. Okay, good enough for our purposes. And if the parents tell Sammy Claus that the children have been bad, the Bugan sweeps them up in his bag and carries them away, and they're never seen again. What? John cried. That is what they tell you. That is Switzerland. And that is why I am here on Mars. The Bugan carried you here? They laughed. The woman, too. Yes, I was always bad. She grew more serious. But we will have no Bugan here. They asked him what he thought of the debate between the Reds and the Greens. And he shrugged and summarized what he could of Anne and Saxe's positions. I don't think they are either right, one of them said. His name was Jürgen, and he was one of their leaders. An engineer who seemed to be kind of a cross between a Burgermeister and a gypsy king. Dark-haired and sharp-faced and serious. Both sides say they are in favor of nature, of course. One has to say this. The Reds say that the Mars that is already here is nature. But it is not nature. Because it is dead. It is only rock. The Greens tell this and say they will bring nature to Mars with their terraforming. But that is not nature either. That is only culture. A garden, you know? An artwork. So neither way gets nature. There isn't such a thing as nature possible on Mars. Interesting, John said. I'll have to tell Anne that and see what she says. But he thought about it. Then what do you call this? What do you call what you're doing? Jurgen shrugged and grinned. We don't call it anything. It's just Mars. Perhaps that was being Swiss, John thought. He had been meeting them more and more in his travels, and they all seemed like that. Do things and don't worry much about the theory. Whatever seemed right. I just made the face. Okay. Later still, after they had drunk another few bottles of wine, he asked them if they had ever heard of the coyote. They laughed. One said, "He's the one who came here before you, right?" They laughed at his expression. They laughed again at his expression. "That's the one that came here before you, right?" "A story only," one explained. "Like the Canals or Big Man. Or Sammy Claus." I'm curious. Oh. Lipstick from my vape. Oh, or probably from the bowl. Because I thought I cleaned my vape before the stream. But I was like, I guess I missed a spot. But it's probably from my bowl, I now realize. Does the coyote paint tunnels? We'll find out. Okay. Yeah, sorry about the ASMR. It's just a myth, like Sammy Claus. Driving north the next day across Melis Chasma, John wished, as he had before, that everyone on the planet was Swiss. Or at least like the Swiss. Or more like the Swiss in certain ways, anyways. Their love of country seemed to be expressed by making a certain kind of life. Rational, just, prosperous, scientific. They would work for that life anywhere, because to them it was the life that mattered. Not a flag or a creed or a set of words, nor even that small rocky patch of land they owned on Earth. The Swiss road-building crew back there was Martian already, having brought the life and left the baggage behind. He sighed and ate his lunch as his rover rolled past transponders north. It was not that simple, of course. The road-building crew were traveling Swiss, gypsies of sort. The kind of Swiss who spent most of their life out of Switzerland. There were a lot of those, but they were selected out by choice. They were different. The Swiss who stayed at home were pretty intense about Swissness, still armed to the teeth, still willing to be the bagman for whoever brought them cash, still not a member of the UN. Although that fact, given the power UNOMA currently had over the current situation, given the power UNOMA currently had over the local situation, made them even more interesting to John as a model. That ability to be part of the world, but to stand away from it at the same time. To use it, but to hold off. To use it, but to hold it off. To be small, but in control. To be armed to the teeth, but never go to war. Wasn't that one way of defining what he wanted for Mars? It seemed to him that there were some lessons there for any hypothetical Martian state. He spent a fair amount of his time alone, thinking about that hypothetical state. It was a kind of obsession with him, and he found it very frustrating that he could not seem to come up with anything other than vague desires. And now he thought hard about Switzerland, and what it might tell him. He tried to be organized about it. Pauline, please call up an encyclopedia article on the Swiss government. Siri, please call up an encyclopedia article on the Swiss government. The rover passed transponder after transponder as he read the article that came up on the screen. He was disappointed to find that there was nothing obviously unique about the Swiss system of government. Executive authority was given to a council of 7, elected by the assembly. No charismatic president, which some part of Boone did not like very much. The assembly, aside from selecting the Federal Council, appeared to do little. It was caught between the power of the Executive Council and the power of the people, as exercised in direct initiatives and referenda. An idea that they had gotten in the 19th century from California, of all places. Page 308. 308. The Assembly, aside from selecting the Federal Council, appeared to do little. It was caught between the power of the Executive Council and the power of the people, as exercised in direct initiatives and referenda. It might be page 259, depending on your print, according to Purple Wayne. An idea that they had gotten in the 19th century from California, of all places. And then there was the federal system. The cantons, in all their diversity, were supposed to have a great deal of independence, which also weakened the assembly. But cantonal power had been eroding for generations, the federal government wrestling away more and more. What did it add up to? Pauline, please call up my Constitution file. Oh, okay. Yes, that's not funny. Pauline, please call up my Constitution file. He added a few notes to the file he had just recently begun. Federal Council, direct initiatives, weak assembly, local independence, particularly in cultural matters. Something to think over, anyway. More data to add to the stew of his ideas. It helped somehow to write it down. He drove on, remembering the road builders' calmness. Their strange mixture of engineering and mysticism. The warmth of their welcome, which wasn't something Boone took for granted. It didn't always happen. In the Arab and Israeli settlements, for instance, he was received very stiffly, perhaps because he was seen as being anti-religion, perhaps because Frank had been spreading tales about him, against him. He had been amazed to discover an Arabic caravan whose members believed that he had forbidden the building of a mosque on Phobos. And they only stared at him when he denied even hearing such a plan. He was pretty sure that was Frank's doing. Word got back to him through Janet and others that Frank was prone to undercutting him in that way. So, yes, there were definitely groups that greeted him coolly. The Arabs, the Israelis, the nuclear reactor teams, some of the transnational executives. Groups with their own intense and parochial programs. People who objected to his larger perspective. Unfortunately, there were a lot of them. He came out of his reverie and looked around. and was surprised to discover that out in the middle of Melis, it looked exactly as if he were out on the northern plains somewhere. The Great Canyon was 200 kilometers wide at this point, and the curvature of the planet was so sharp that the North and South Canyon walls, all 3 vertical kilometers of them, were completely under the horizons. Not until the following morning did the northern horizon double, and then separate out into the canyon floor. And the Great Northern Wall, which was cut in two by the gap of a short north-south canyon connecting Melis, and then separate out into the canyon floor and the Great Northern Wall, which was cut in two by the gap of a short north-south canyon connecting Melis and Candor. It was only when he drove into that wide slot that he had the kind of view that people thought of when they imagined being down in Marineris. Truly giant walls flanked him on both sides. Dark brown slabs riven by a fractal infinity of gullies and ridges. At the foot of the walls lay huge spills of ancient rockfall, or the broken terracing of fossil beaches. In this gap, the Swiss road was a line of green transponders snaking past mesas and arroyos, so that it looked as if Monument Valley had been relocated to the bottom of a canyon twice as deep and 5 times as wide as the Grand Canyon. The sight was too astonishing for John to be able to The sight was too astonishing for John to be able to concentrate on anything else, and for the first time in his journey, he drove all day with Pauline off. North of the transverse gap, he drove into the huge sink of Candor Chasma, and now it was as if he were in a gigantic replica of the Painted Desert, with great deposition layers everywhere, bands of purple and yellow sediment, orange dunes, red erratics, pink sands, indigo gullies. Truly a fantastic, extravagant landscape. Disorienting to the eye because of all the wild colors that made it hard to figure out what was what, and how big it was, and how far away. Giant plateaus that seemed about to block his way would turn out to be curving strata on a distant cliff. Small boulders next to the transponder would turn out to be enormous mesas half a day's drive away. And in the sunset light, all the colors blazed, the whole Martian spectrum revealed, and blazing as if color was bursting out of the rock. Everything from pale yellow to dark bruised purple. Candor Chasma. He was going to have to come back sometime and explore it. The day after that, he drove up the steady slope of the North Ophir Road, which the Swiss crew had completed the previous year. Up and up and up, and then, without ever seeing a distinct rim, he was out of the canyons, rolling past the domed holes of Ganges Katana, and then over the old familiar plain, following a wide road, over the tight horizon, past Chernobyl and Underhill. Then on for another day west to Ekis Overlook, Sax's new terraforming headquarters. His journey had taken a week and crossed 2,500 kilometers. Any pictures though? Yes, there are though. Thank you for asking, because I might have shown this on day one. We're back at Sassy's HQ. Okay, I might have shown this on literally day one. But then I never showed it again because it didn't make sense to me. I have to pee really bad, but I'm showing you this because I care. There's Nicosia. Holy shit. Right? That's where the first story starts. Where's Underhill? Now I know what Underhill is. Underhill's right there. Okay, I'm so excited. I haven't looked at this again. Ignore the mold on the page. This is really old. Wait, oh, it's not mold. I thought it was because the book's really old, but it's actually topology. And there's Underhill. Oh, the Hellas Planitia. Here's the polar cap. See it with CO2 ice. Oh, that's the southern pole, and that's the North Pole. And this is Vestidas Borealis, and the Acidalia Planitia, the Utopia Planitia, Arcadia Planitia, the Argyre Planitia. Okay, I don't know what those... It's a whole bunch. I don't know how big this is.